All right, welcome back. We are jumping back into our deep dive on the let them theory.
Picking up right where we left off.
Yeah, we're getting into the nitty-gritty now, like the really, really good stuff.
The good stuff, yeah. We're in the back half of the book now.
We are. So, just as a reminder, we've been exploring this whole idea of how letting go of the need to control others can really like shift the dynamic in our own lives. It's about reclaiming our power and finding peace. And today we're going to be focusing on chapters 15 through the conclusion.
Right, we're going to try to distill the essence of each of those chapters without overwhelming you with too much information, but enough to give you a taste, enough to whet your appetite.
Right, to make you want to go out and grab the book yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe even join us in future discussions.
Exactly. Okay, so chapter 15 dives right into a really common and I think often tricky situation, which is wanting to help someone we love who is struggling.
Yeah, it could be any kind of struggle, right?
Right.
We're talking maybe addiction, mental health challenges, like you name it. Life throws curveballs.
Exactly. And what really struck me right away in this chapter was this idea that's almost counterintuitive, which is that sometimes our urge to rescue can actually be counterproductive.
It's tough to swallow
Right.
because we're wired to care.
Yeah, it feels wrong. It feels like, well, wait, shouldn't I be doing everything I can to help?
Right, and
Yeah.
that's the natural instinct, right? But what the book really dives into is this idea that you can't actually want someone's recovery more than they do.
More than they want it themselves, yeah. Like you can't force it.
Exactly. Lasting change has to come from within.
Yeah.
If someone isn't ready or willing to do the work, all of our efforts to kind of prop them up or rescue them can actually prevent them from facing those issues head on and building that resilience they need.
Yeah, and I think that point was so perfectly illustrated with that story about the author's daughter's anxiety, where the daughter was afraid to sleep in her own bed.
I remember that. And as a
Mm.
parent, your heart breaks, right?
And the author, trying to be supportive, allowed her to sleep on the floor, which seemed like a small act of comfort, in the moment, but actually ended up really fueling the anxiety, not helping her overcome it.
It's a great example of how stepping in to try to avoid discomfort can actually backfire in the long run.
Yeah.
And it kind of speaks to the core message of the book, which is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is actually take a step back.
Yeah, it's about allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Because, as uncomfortable as that might be, it's often a crucial part of their healing process.
Absolutely. It forces them to confront those issues head on and ultimately develop their own coping mechanisms, their own inner strength. So the book really emphasizes the importance of that, even though it might feel counterintuitive.
And I think the book does a really great job of clarifying the difference between enabling and truly supporting someone.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction.
Because it can be hard to tease those two apart sometimes. And so, for example, it talks about how just giving someone money unconditionally, financial support can actually remove the pressure for them to seek help or take responsibility for their own situation.
It's almost like removing the need for them to actually make changes.
Exactly. Like you're almost enabling the behavior to
Yeah,
continue.
right. It's kind of creating this cushion that prevents them from hitting that point where they realize, okay, I need to make a change.
Yeah. And I think that's a really tough one for a lot of people, especially when it's someone you love deeply.
It is. It is. It's hard to see someone you care about struggling. But as we learn from the book, sometimes that tough love approach can actually be the most beneficial in the long run.
It's not about being cold or uncaring.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set those boundaries, offer support with maybe some conditions attached that are linked to positive change.
Like offering to help them find a therapist, for example, instead of just handing over cash with no strings attached.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about empowering them to take ownership of their situation.
Yeah, and I think that's so key. It's about empowerment, not enabling.
And that story about the author's husband's business struggles and his brother's decision not to bail him out, that was a tough one to read, but it's a powerful example of how sometimes hitting rock bottom can be the very thing that forces someone to reevaluate and find a new path.
Yeah, it's like that moment of truth, right? When there's nowhere else to turn, it can be a catalyst for real, lasting change.
And it's important to note that this is just one example and it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. But the book uses it to illustrate that sometimes allowing someone to face the consequences of their choices can be the most effective way to help them break free from a destructive cycle.
And then on the flip side, the book contrasts that with the author's own experience with postpartum depression. And the support she received wasn't so much about being asked for help and being actively rescued.
Right, it was more about the people around her intuitively creating a supportive and healing environment.
Exactly. Like they sensed what she needed and just provided it without making a big deal out of it.
It's a subtle but really important distinction.
It's about understanding the need without directly intervening in the problematic behavior itself.
Exactly. And, as chapter 15 wraps up, I think the key takeaway for me is that our role isn't to be a fixer.
Right. We're not there to solve their problems for them.
It's to be more like a steady beacon of hope.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's about believing in their ability to get better, even when they might be struggling to believe in themselves. We can offer that belief. We can provide a safe space for them to do the work that only they can do.
Yeah, and to do it at their own pace. I love that. Okay, so moving on to chapter 16, things shift a bit, and we're now entering the realm of romantic relationships.
The always fun and sometimes frustrating world of dating and commitment.
It's so true. And one of the first things the book tackles is this idea of chasing love, which I think so many of us can relate to.
Right, it's that feeling of almost desperately seeking out a connection.
And the book suggests that this pursuit can actually lead us to compromise on the things that are truly important to us, and maybe even miss out on deeper, more authentic connections that might be right there.
Yeah, it's like we're so focused on finding the love that we kind of overlook the love that might already be present, or we settle for less than we deserve.
Exactly. And what I found really insightful in this chapter was the emphasis on being authentically yourself right from the start.
Not trying to mold yourself into what you think someone else is looking for.
Yeah, like not pretending to be someone you're not just to please someone else.
Yeah.
And the book really stresses the importance of recognizing when someone's not genuinely interested. And it offers that very straightforward piece of advice.
Straightforward and kind of genius at the same time.
I know, right? It's like texting is easy, but making plans shows intent.
Right. It's such a simple concept, but it's so powerful.
It really cuts through all the noise, doesn't it? Like how many times have we overanalyzed a text message?
Oh, I'm so guilty of that.
When the real indicator of interest is whether someone is willing to actually make the effort to spend time with you.
Absolutely. Actions speak louder than words, especially in the world of dating.
It's all about those actions.
And the book also encourages you to be, I love this phrase, black and white, about people's behavior in dating.
Like no more gray areas.
Yeah, instead of getting caught up in analyzing mixed signals or holding on to that faint hope, it advocates for choosing relationships where the interest and the effort are clearly demonstrated.
Like you know where you stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it brings up this really crucial point that sometimes the most beneficial thing you can do for yourself is to actually be single for a period of time, to focus on your own happiness and your own healing before you try to bring someone else into the mix.
Because if you're not whole and happy on your own, it's really hard to create a healthy relationship with someone else.
Absolutely. And the book kind of challenges that common belief that every dating disappointment is just about meeting the wrong person.
Right, like, oh, it's them, not me. Exactly. But it suggests that maybe, just maybe, our own patterns and choices are playing a more significant role than we realize.
And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also really empowering because it means we have the ability to change those patterns.
Exactly. We have the power to shift our approach, to make different choices.
Yeah. And I thought that anecdote about Matthew Hussey and his now wife Audrey was a perfect illustration of this, where that really direct and honest conversation, they had completely shifted the dynamic of their relationship.
I love that story because it highlights the importance of being upfront about what you're looking for.
Exactly. It's not about playing games or being coy. It's about clear communication and not being afraid to articulate your needs and desires.
And to walk away if those needs aren't being met. The book uses the term table scraps, which might sound a little harsh.
It does. It does.
But it effectively conveys that idea of not settling for minimal effort or lukewarm interest. It's about having the courage to say no to those situations that aren't fulfilling so you can create space for a relationship that truly nourishes you.
You deserve the whole meal, not just the scraps. All right, so moving on to chapter 17. We're now shifting the focus to the nuances of longer-term relationships.
And specifically, how to distinguish between those normal challenges that every couple faces versus signs that might point to deeper, more fundamental issues within the partnership.
Yeah, because every relationship is going to have its ups and downs. It's about recognizing when those downs are just part of the natural flow and when they might be red flags.
Exactly. And the book really emphasizes that mutual give and take and compromise are essential for any relationship to last and thrive.
Like it can't be all one-sided.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, that sense of equality. And it provides a realistic perspective by acknowledging that no relationship will ever be perfect. There will inevitably be disagreements and challenges to navigate.
I love that because so often we get caught up in this fairy tale idea of what love should be.
Right, and then when reality hits, it can be really disillusioning.
Exactly. So it's about having those realistic expectations. And the book revisits the ABC loop here. Apologize, ask, back observe behavior, celebrate change, model change as a really practical tool for fostering positive change within a relationship.
It's a great reminder of that framework because it emphasizes that you can't force someone to change.
Right, they have to want to change.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where positive change is more likely, but it's not about manipulation or demands.
Yeah, that's so key. It's about influence, not control. And the book suggests allowing a good amount of time, like at least 3 months, of consistent positive change and observation to determine if your influence is having a genuine impact.
Yeah, it takes time. It's not an overnight process. It's about giving things time to evolve organically.
So patience is key here.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most challenging things the book addresses in this chapter is that question of when to apply the let them be principle within a committed relationship versus recognizing when the relationship might actually have run its course.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. It's about that discernment, right? Knowing when you're truly accepting your partner as they are versus just tolerating a situation that consistently leaves you feeling unhappy or unfulfilled.
Yeah, like when does acceptance become settling?
Exactly. And that example of the author's friend who's struggling with her husband's health really illustrates this. The advice given was to allow him to experience the natural consequences of his choices.
Like letting him get winded during pickleball, for example, without immediately jumping in with reassurance or trying to fix it for him.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how sometimes allowing reality to provide its own feedback can be much more effective than our constant intervention.
And it's not about being uncaring or indifferent.
No, it's about respecting their autonomy and allowing them to learn and grow from their own experiences.
And then there's this really profound concept of truly choosing your partner exactly as they are, imperfections and all.
Warts and all, right?
The author uses her own marriage and her experience with ADHD as an example. It's about acknowledging those flaws, those quirks, and making a conscious decision that you can genuinely accept them.
Rather than constantly wishing or trying to mold them into someone they're not.
Because that's a recipe for disaster. Right. You can't change someone's fundamental nature.
And that leads us to that really important distinction between commitment and fundamental compatibility.
Which can be so tricky to navigate.
Because you can be deeply committed to someone and both willing to put in the effort, but if there are core incompatibilities, like fundamentally different life goals about where to live, whether to have children, how to manage finances.
The big stuff.
The big stuff. Those issues can be incredibly challenging, if not impossible to overcome in the long run.
Yeah. Love and commitment can only take you so far. And the book really drives home this point that you can't change your partner's fundamental desires, and ultimately you have to decide if you're willing to compromise on your own deeply held values.
It's about those non-negotiables, right?
Exactly. And I think that statistic that was mentioned about how a significant percentage of relationship problems are perpetual really makes you think.
Meaning they're likely to be ongoing challenges, not easily resolved conflicts.
Exactly. So it really makes you think about what you're willing to live with long term, what you can accept, and what you absolutely can't.
It's about making those conscious choices, entering into relationships with eyes wide open.
Okay, so now we're moving into chapter 18, and this is where things get a little bit heavier, a little bit more emotional. We're talking about surviving heartbreak.
Yeah, it's a universal experience, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. But the book applies the let them principle to navigating breakups and offers some really practical guidance for getting through that painful experience.
It starts by acknowledging something really important, which is that heartbreak is a legitimate form of grief.
It is. It comes with all those stages of loss and pain that accompany any significant loss in our lives.
And the book validates those feelings. Instead of trying to minimize them or tell you to just get over it.
It allows you to feel those emotions fully.
Exactly. And then it addresses something that I think so many of us can relate to, which is that almost overwhelming urge to constantly check up on an ex.
Oh, yeah. Social media stalking, the late night texts.
It's so tempting, but it can be so detrimental to the healing process.
And the book offers that advice of no contact for 30 days, as a way to break those old nervous system patterns.
It's about creating that space, that distance, to allow yourself to start healing.
And it also shares some research that suggests it takes around 11 weeks for most people to start feeling noticeably better after a breakup.
Which I think can be really helpful to hear when you're in the thick of it and it feels like the pain will never end.
Like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not going to last forever.
Exactly. And then the chapter outlines some very actionable steps you can take to heal, like allowing yourself to feel your emotions fully without trying to suppress them, reaching out to your support system, your friends, your family.
It's so important to lean on those people who love you during those tough times.
Absolutely. And the book also suggests filling your time with activities you enjoy. You know, get out there, do things that bring you joy to avoid dwelling on the past.
Keep yourself busy. Keep your mind occupied.
Exactly. And maybe set a personal challenge for yourself, something to rebuild your self-esteem and confidence.
Yeah, something to kind of refocus that energy on yourself.
And ultimately, it's about reframing the breakup, not as an ending, but as a step forward towards meeting the right person for you.
Yeah, it's about seeing it as an opportunity for growth and learning.
And the book emphasizes this really crucial message. Time doesn't heal all wounds. What you do with your time does.
That's so powerful.
It's a reminder that healing isn't passive. It's not about just waiting for the pain to go away. It's about taking an active role in your own recovery.
It's about choosing to heal.
Exactly. And then the chapter concludes with a really beautiful and important reminder. You are the love of your life. It brings the focus back to self-love as the foundation for all other meaningful relationships.
I love that. It's such a good reminder. Okay, so finally, we arrive at the conclusion, and this is where the book really brings the central theme full circle and leaves us with this powerful message that the ability to create the life and love we truly deserve lies within us.
We hold the power.
It's not about external circumstances, it's about our own choices and our own mindset.
And the book uses this beautiful analogy of the ever-changing sky. You know, we can't control the weather, we can't control the clouds, but we can control how we respond to them.
We can choose to see the beauty in the storm.
Exactly. And it underscores the fact that we get to decide how things affect us, whether it's facing criticism, navigating challenging experiences, or even witnessing the success of others.
It's about reclaiming our own agency, not giving our power away to external forces.
And it makes the important point that embracing this let them philosophy isn't some kind of quick fix or magical solution.
It's not a magic wand.
It's a fundamental shift in how we approach life and our relationships. It's an ongoing practice of letting go of what we can't control
Yeah.
and focusing on what we can.
And that's a lifelong journey, right?
It is. It's a process of continuous growth and evolution.
And the book ends on such a hopeful and supportive note, expressing belief in our ability to achieve our dreams and find joy and fulfillment, and encouraging us to take that first step.
It's so empowering. It leaves you feeling like you can do anything.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these final chapters of the Let Them theory, I hope this discussion has been helpful and insightful for you. It's been such a pleasure to explore this book with you.
It really has. And as always, this has just been a taste of what the book has to offer.
It's just scratching the surface.
Yeah, so we highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the Let Them theory and read it for yourself. There's so many more valuable details and insights and personal stories that we didn't even touch on.
And we would love to hear your thoughts on it if you do decide to give it a read.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned for future deep dives. We've got some really fascinating books lined up for our upcoming discussions.
Covering all sorts of interesting topics.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring psychology, personal development, maybe even a little bit of history.
Always something new and exciting.
So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on our next book club selection.
See you next time.
Bye for now.